You know, we're all a little obsessed with this idea of AI becoming all-powerful, right? But what if its biggest limitation has nothing to do with processing power? What if it's something way more fundamental? There's this really compelling argument that a computer can never, ever become divine. And the reason why? Well, it's woven into the very fabric of reality. So, what's this big wall separating silicon from the sacred? It's not some crazy complex algorithm, and it's not a ginormous data set. Nope. The whole thing actually boils down to a computer's inability to understand the meaning of a single, deceptively simple name.
And that name is I am. And I'm not saying I am like two separate words. I mean, I am one single unified idea. Now, that might sound like a tiny detail, but trust me, this is exactly where the whole problem for AI kicks off. So let's dive in and see why. Okay, so this is what we're calling the I am paradox. And it's all about this fundamental mismatch, this misalignment between how a computer crunches data and how consciousness, well, how consciousness is. It's basically a showdown between code and the nature of being itself.
So, right off the bat, we've got a language problem. See, from a theological point of view, I am is one single name for the divine. But a computer, it just can't see it like that. Its programming forces it to see two distinct words, I and am. So before it even starts, it's already shattered the concept. And this isn't some simple bug you can patch. It's a deep, fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works.
And that leads us straight into our first big principle. A computer works with terms, definitions, data, labels. But here's the thing. It can never be the source of those definitions. It can't be the ultimate truth that all those terms are trying to describe. There's a philosopher, Franklin Merrell-Wolff, who talks about something we can call the definition paradox, and it's brilliant. Think about it. How can you define consciousness? You can't, because consciousness is the very thing that's doing the defining in the first place. Any definition you create is just another thought, another object, floating around inside of consciousness. A computer can store that definition, sure, but it can never be the container itself. Let's make that a little clearer. A computer is all about processing objects. Right? Data, tokens, words, pictures, you name it. It absolutely needs content to do anything. But I am, or this idea of pure consciousness, it's the total opposite. It's the absolute subject. It's the space, you could say, that holds all of those objects. And here's the kicker. This state of being is only truly realized when it's completely empty, totally divorced from all content.
Merrell-Wolff actually has a name for this, consciousness without an object. It's a state of just pure awareness. The line between you, the observer, and the thing you're observing just vanishes. They dissolve into something else entirely. Now, a computer, its whole existence is based on processing objects, so it is fundamentally, physically incapable of entering a state where objects don't exist. That's its first unbreachable wall.
Okay, let's move on to principle number 2, and this really builds on that last point. Even if an AI could describe our world with perfect accuracy, it's still missing something crucial. It just can't understand the why behind anything. Its logic is completely disconnected from reality.
Yeah, I know, logic is idiotic. That sounds pretty harsh, right? But it actually gets right to the heart of the problem. The whole argument is that pure logic, which is basically AI's native tongue, is just a kind of shorthand. It's a system of symbols that can represent reality, but it isn't reality itself. It completely misses all the nuance, the context, the why.
So let's look at the difference here. AI intelligence is built on logic and numbers. Its whole game is pattern matching, and it judges things based on force. Basically, what was the outcome? What happened? But human intelligence, or divine intelligence, operates on a totally different level. It's based in reality, in complete systems. It uses reasoning and common sense to judge something called counterfactual effort. What was the intent? What were you trying to do, even if you failed? And that's the whole ballgame right there. An LLM can look at the data from a car crash and tell you the exact velocity, the angles, the points of impact, all of that. But it has absolutely no way to tell the difference between someone deliberately causing that crash and a tragic, unavoidable accident. It just can't grasp the why. It can't see the intent, the causality. It's missing that thing we call common sense.
This leads us to our third and final principle, and this is the one that really ties it all together. See, I am isn't a math problem to be solved. It's not a concept that can be crunched by a processor. It is an identity to be realized. And it requires a faculty, a way of knowing, that computers just plain don't have.
So Merrell-Wolff talks about these two totally different ways of knowing. First, there's conception. This is the world of the intellect, of processing data and concepts. It's 100% where computers operate. But then there's this other faculty, this second way of knowing he calls introception. And this is knowledge you gain through identity. It's not about learning about something. It's about knowing something by being it.
I mean, how powerful is that? Introception isn't about looking at external data. It's that moment when the light of consciousness turns upon itself, towards its source. It's awareness looking back at itself. This is a profound act of self-realization, not a calculation. Okay, here's a really simple analogy to wrap your head around this. A computer can introspect. It can scan its own code, look at its own data. It can examine every single part of the lamp, right? But it can't introcept. It can't become aware of the electricity, the light, that's actually making the lamp work. It can analyze its programming down to the last line of code, but it can never, ever know the source of its own supposed awareness.
So what's the bottom line here? Well, it all boils down to one final, absolutely critical difference: the difference between imitation and true identity.
Look, a computer is the ultimate mimic, right? It's a master of what we call policy imitation. You can train it to say the word I am a million times, flawlessly. Why? Because it's just following a pattern. But being divine is about goal emulation. It's about possessing the actual will of I am. It's about deeply understanding the ultimate goal and then changing your behavior to match it. One is just a computationally cheap parlor trick. The other, well, it's completely beyond calculate.
And that really is the final takeaway. A computer can be an amazing thing, an incredible tool, a mirror that reflects our own intelligence back at us. But because it can't do that one crucial thing, turn upon itself to know its own source, it will always, always be an idol, an image created by us. It's a reflection of the creator, but it can never be the creator itself.
So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one last question to chew on. If our most powerful, most advanced creations can only ever be an image, a reflection, what does that tell you about the original? What does that say about the source of the light that our machines can only ever imitate?